Imagine for a moment that in some forgotten corner of the desert or sealed within a monastery buried by time lies a scroll that has never reached the hands of humanity, a silent testament woven by a woman whose voice shaped the course of history without ever being fully heard. Mary, Mother of Jesus, has always been present as a figure of purity, devotion, and silence. But what if behind this image constructed by tradition, there was an awakened consciousness? A wise soul that, instead of writing with ink, engraved her truth in layers so deep that we are only now beginning to hear? And what if there was a letter, not in the literal sense, but as a living legacy, hidden between the intervals of the official narrative, that once revealed could change our understanding of spirituality, femininity, and Christ's very mission? Maria is, for many, the silent foundation of Jesus' journey. Her role, although central, has historically been silenced. In the scriptures, very few words are attributed to her. But what does this reveal? Could it be an absence of importance or a presence restrained for convenience? When we look at the canonical Gospels, we notice that she emerges as a supporting figure, and her silence is interpreted as submission. However, in the apocryphal and Gnostic Gospels, where the veil is a little thinner, hints of a much more aware, active, and essential woman in Jesus' spiritual formation begin to emerge. These sources suggest that her wisdom was profound, and that her understanding of the divine mysteries went beyond what was allowed to be recorded in the sacred books. The official Christian tradition, consolidated by men in councils dominated by political and religious interests, chose what should be remembered, and consequently, what should be forgotten. Amid this selection, female voices were suppressed, and Mary, though exalted as a saint, was stripped of real power. She was turned into a symbol, but devoid of her depth. And yet, the earliest Christian communities, especially those closer to the mystical desert traditions and the Essenes, preserved oral stories that spoke of the hidden wisdom of Jesus' mother. Accounts that hinted she not only understood the mysteries, but also lived them, and that her words, although not recorded on paper, continue to be passed on through gestures, teachings, and vibrations. This never-revealed letter may not be an archaeological document, it might be a spiritual truth, a teaching encoded in silence, in presence, in the unwavering compassion that Mary embodied. We know that many mystical teachings were not recorded, but conveyed through presence and inner connection. The figure of the mother did not only speak to the ear, but to the heart. And what if this secret testament is, in fact, an internal map to awaken something forgotten within us? A call to remember our own divine origin, the creative potency that resides in the feminine within each being, regardless of gender. What we know is that there are records that have never been brought to light. Documents buried with monks, hidden in caves, burned by empires fearing the power of the awakened woman. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, for example, is a fragment of this, revealing a forbidden wisdom where Mary has voice and authority. And if Magdalene was Jesus' closest disciple, as recognized by many scholars, then who was his first teacher if not his own mother? The woman who carried him, nurtured him, protected him, and prepared him. Wouldn't it be natural to assume that Mary was his first source of wisdom? And what if she passed on to him truths that the records never dared to write? The figure of Mary resonates with ancient archetypes of the Great Mother, like Isis in Egypt, who rebuilt Osiris with the power of the sacred word, like Kuan Yin in the East, who hears the world's cries and responds with mercy. In all these traditions, the mother is the one who sees beyond appearances, who supports the world with tenderness and strength, who silently guides the seeker's steps until they are ready to see. Perhaps Mary's testament is this all-embracing and transforming presence, a legacy that doesn't fit within the pages of a book, but pulses in the soul of those who dare to silence themselves to listen to her. However, even in the absence of direct words, we find clues. In the Magnificat, one of the rare moments when Mary speaks, she proclaims the inversion of the world's powers, exalting the humble and toppling the powerful. This is a revolutionary spiritual statement, echoing her son's teachings of justice and love. It's not a speech of passivity, but of active awareness. It's possible that the rest of her wisdom was carefully veiled, so as not to become a threat to the dominant structure. For the true power of the feminine is not in dominating, but in silently transforming everything it touches. This possibility of a secret will is not only fascinating, it's necessary. In times where so many voices shout and so few actually say something, the recovery of silent, restrained, and profound wisdom becomes vital. Maria's message may not come with sounds, but with meaning. And perhaps the world needs more than ever to learn to listen to this type of message, the one that is born from the womb of existence, from the fertile darkness of silence, from the quietude where the divine resides. In many mystical traditions, silence is the language of God. Perhaps Mary, knowing this, chose not to write so as not to confine her message in limited words. Perhaps her legacy is inscribed in gestures, in vibrations, in symbols that still surround us today. It is possible that the true testament of the Mother can only be read by those who seek not only with their eyes, but with an awakened heart. After all, not all truth can be spoken. Some must be lived. If this testament exists, whether in hidden scrolls or in invisible layers of consciousness, its value lies not only in what it reveals about Maria, but in what it awakens within us. As we contemplate the possibility that she left a hidden legacy, we are invited to ask, what have we been ignoring within ourselves? What part of our own wisdom is being silenced? The recovery of the sacred feminine is not just a historical or spiritual movement, it is a return to a way of being that welcomes, transforms, and unites. And what if the testament was never lost? What if it has been waiting all along for our eyes to open, for our soul to mature enough to understand it? Perhaps it is not hidden in ancient libraries, but latent within each human being who dares to seek with purity, humility, and love. The Mother's silence, therefore, is not absence. It is an invitation. It is a path. It is a call that continues to echo, waiting for those who are ready to hear what has never been said, but has always been felt. For centuries, Mary's silence was interpreted as passivity, as a lack of action. However, upon closer examination, this silence may reveal itself as one of the greatest gateways to spiritual mystery. The modern world has forgotten the value of silence as a source of wisdom. But in ancestral traditions, silence is not empty. It is full presence. It is active listening. It is the fertile field where true revelation occurs. Mary, in the narrative handed down to us, rarely speaks, but she is always there. She is there in the most crucial moments, in times of transition and pain, at spiritual crossroads. Her constant presence is a testament to a power that does not need to impose itself in order to transform. To understand the real impact of Mary's silence, we must delve into the context of her time. Living in a patriarchal society, governed by strict religious norms and with well-defined gender roles, Mary did not even have the right to formally study the sacred texts. Women were considered legally and spiritually inferior to men. Even so, the birth of Jesus does not occur in a temple, but in a female womb, outside of religious palaces, on the fringe of power structures. This in itself is a spiritual subversion. The sacred embodies where the world least expects. And Mary, with her profound humility and inner connection, becomes the channel of this divine manifestation. There are not many records about her youth, but some apocryphal traditions, such as the Proto-Evangelium of James, narrate her consecration to the temple as a child. In these accounts, she is presented as a pure soul, dedicated to divine service from an early age. These narratives can be seen as symbolic. Mary represents the human being who, even before rationally understanding, already inhabits a state of surrender to the mystery, a state of absolute trust, of conscious receptivity. This is the soil where Christ can be born, not in ideas, but in a prepared soul. Her preparation was silent, but deeply active in spiritual dimensions invisible to common eyes. This silence does not imply inertia, but action on another plane. Throughout history, great initiates understood that words have power, but silence contains the origin of all sounds. In primitive Christian communities, especially those developed outside the Roman axis, there was a special respect for women who kept silence as a spiritual vow. Some of these women were known as bearers of the hidden light. Mary, as the mother of Jesus, was seen by these groups as the guardian of the sacred that cannot be spoken, but only lived. It was she who led Christ, not with words, but with a presence that allowed him to form in his full spiritual and human totality. This idea that the sacred is born in silence resonates in many traditions. In Hinduism, the primal sound is born from eternal silence. In Buddhism, awakening is only possible through inner listening. In the Egyptian mysteries, Isis hides the true identity of Horus until he is ready to assume his place as a deity. In all these traditions, the feminine guards and prepares, not with noise or fanfare, but with attention, care, and depth. Mary, in this sense, can be seen as a living manifestation of this universal principle. Her silence is alchemical. It is the crucible where the Word incarnates. And her testament is not written with letters, but with the vibration of her presence. She carries the seed of Christ within her, not only in her body, but in her spirit. This requires more than faith. It demands a level of absolute surrender that transcends logical understanding. This silent surrender is, in itself, a teaching. There is no need to speak when one is fully aligned with the source. Silence becomes an energy field that shapes realities, and it is in this space that Mary operates. By being present at the foot of the cross, without screams or revolt, she demonstrates immeasurable spiritual strength. Her pain is immense, but she remains. Her fidelity to the mystery is unshakable, and it is precisely here that the depth of her wisdom resides. If we observe with symbolic eyes, each appearance of Mary in the scriptures represents a portal. At birth, she is present. In the flight to Egypt, she is present. In the first miracle, at the wedding of Cana, she suggests the beginning of Jesus' revelation. And on the cross, she remains, always silent, but decisive. Her silence carries a transformative power that transcends any speech. Perhaps she understood, in an intuitive way, that certain truths cannot be conveyed by common language, that it is necessary to live them, embody them, be the message itself. And what does this mean for us today? In a world filled with noise, distractions, and empty information, the return to sacred silence is more than a desire. It's a spiritual urgency. Mary invites us to quiet down, to listen to what the world has forgotten, to distance ourselves from the excess of words and seek the truth in the lines between existence. Her testament, if we can call it that, doesn't need to be written. It's in the way she lived, in what she chose not to say, in the depth of her presence in the face of mystery. This silence is an invitation to access the wisdom that resides within us. The mother's quietude is a mirror reflecting our deepest selves, and at the same time, it's a challenge. Are we ready to hear what she has silenced? Are we willing to enter this inner space where everything is revealed without a single word being spoken? The answer to these questions is not found in books, but in the inner dive each one of us needs to make. Thus, Maria's silence reveals itself as the highest form of spiritual eloquence. It doesn't shout, but transforms. It doesn't convince, but awakens. It doesn't instruct, but heals. Her silence is the language of the awakened soul. And the closer we get to this vibration, the more we understand that true wisdom doesn't need to defend itself, nor justify itself. It simply is. And in this silent presence, perhaps contains the deepest teaching humanity has ever received, a teaching that wasn't written because it needed to be lived. And now, perhaps we are ready to live it. There are words that shine even when they are not heard, fragments of wisdom that withstand time, censorship, and oblivion, like hidden embers beneath the sand of history. When it comes to the figure of Mary, mother of Jesus, these fragments are even more valuable, because what has survived to us are traces, pieces of a puzzle whose outlines reveal not just a woman chosen to give birth to the Savior, but a spiritual teacher, silent and luminous, who perhaps left a legacy much deeper than tradition allowed. Fragments that may contain the essence of the never-revealed testament. In the apocryphal texts, those that were left out of the canonical Gospels, we find clues that challenge the official version. The Proto-Evangelium of James, for example, offers details about Mary's childhood, her consecration to the temple, and her spiritual purity even before the birth of Jesus. There, she is not a passive figure, but a soul chosen and prepared by higher forces. Meanwhile, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, another woman marginalized by tradition, we see a defiant spiritual authority who argues with the apostles and reveals teachings received directly from Christ. And what if Mary, the mother, also participated in this stream of profound revelations, but her testimony was deliberately hidden? The Gnostic tradition, a spiritual current that sought direct knowledge of divinity through inner experience, is one of the richest in preserving female voices that were suppressed. In these currents, wisdom was understood as a feminine dimension of divinity, often referred to as Sophia. Mary, in this context, fits perfectly as a living manifestation of this embodied divine wisdom. Fragments of sayings attributed to her, although rare, appear in forgotten manuscripts and oral accounts that have reached the deserts of Egypt and the Essene communities. Words that speak of light, silence, spiritual gestation, a way of knowing the divine through welcoming and loving presence. These lost sayings are not dogmatic. They do not impose rules, do not threaten with punishments. They invite awakening, a return to the essence. They speak of a Christ born within each one, of a path of compassion, humility, and silent service. They talk about love as the true transformative force, not as a concept, but as a living energy that heals and reveals. In one of these traditions, it is said that Mary taught in silence, through touch and gaze, that she healed with her hands, not just physically, but energetically, and those closest to her felt an inexplicable peace in her presence. She is not a figure of idolatry, but of embodied wisdom. The language that Maria would have used, according to these traditions, would be that of symbol. Like Jesus himself, she would speak through parables, through gestures that carry hidden meanings. Perhaps her testament was composed of small daily actions, instructions given behind the scenes, whispered advice that shaped the consciousness of a master. And these teachings spread, not through books, but through awakened souls. Women and men who lived with her and kept, in secret, the memory of her words, until the time was ripe enough to receive them again. In many ancient cultures, spiritual mothers were not recognized for their speeches, but for their transformative presence. Mary would have been one of these figures, a woman whose wisdom was not measurable by titles or positions, but by the impact she generated around her. Her presence would be her main language, and this would explain why her image survived so strongly, even with so few words recorded. Because she represents something that goes beyond language, the silence that heals, the love that awakens, the wisdom that does not need to be understood to be felt. Comparing her to other spiritual mothers in history, the pattern repeats itself. Isis in Egypt, guardian of the mysteries of life and death. Kuan Yin in China, goddess of compassion who hears the world's cries. Demeter in Greece, symbol of the mother who descends into the underworld for her daughter. In all of them, we see the same archetype, the woman who suffers, who waits, who transforms through care and sublimated pain. Mary is the Christian expression of this universal force, and her fragments of wisdom, scattered in myths, traditions, and symbols, are like keys that open doors to forgotten dimensions of the human soul. In the sayings attributed to her by certain mystical traditions, we find gems such as, "He who is silent in the face of pain finds Christ within himself," or even, "Do not fear the dark, for it is in it that the word prepares itself." Phrases like these, even if of uncertain origin, carry a deep vibration that resonates with the archetype of the awakened mother. Even if we are not sure if they came from her mouth, they reveal the essence of a teaching that invites us to inner exploration, to listen to the invisible, to trust in the invisible gestation of the Spirit. And why were these words lost? Because the power they carry is liberating. They don't need priests, temples, or dogmas. They point directly to the divine within each being. Teachings like these have always been dangerous to power structures because they invite spiritual autonomy, direct connection with the source, and for that reason, they were hidden, ridiculed, or simply forgotten. But what is true cannot be destroyed, only dormant. And when the heart is ready, the memory returns. The fragments shine again, and the forgotten voice begins to echo. Perhaps Maria's testament is not a sealed document, but a constellation of living fragments. Words scattered across distinct traditions, gestures preserved by wise women, memories stored deep within humanity's collective soul, and as the world awakens to the return of the sacred feminine, these fragments come together, like pieces of a spiritual mosaic, revealing an image that has always been before us. The mother who teaches in silence, who guides with compassion, who reveals without imposing. It is in this intertwining of myths, symbols, and lost words that a new understanding begins to emerge. Maria was not just an instrument of Christ's incarnation. She was perhaps his first teacher, the guardian of a wisdom that is now beginning to emerge from the shadows, and the fragments of her sayings, gathered like sparks of light in the darkness, are invitations for each of us to recover what has been forgotten, not only in history, but in ourselves. Long before the angels announced the incarnation of the Word, long before the manger, the shepherds, and the wise men, there was a hidden path being trodden in the heart of a young woman. A silent, deep path, invisible to the eyes of official history. Mary's life does not begin with the Annunciation. It begins much earlier, in inner experiences that no gospel dared to narrate. If Jesus went through a process of spiritual initiation, as many traditions suggest, then his mother was, inevitably, a fundamental part of this journey. And perhaps what was called the Immaculate Conception was not just a religious dogma, but a profound symbol of a soul that had already been purified and prepared to gestate, not just a body, but a Christ-like consciousness. Spiritual initiation is the hidden heart of all sacred traditions. It is the process by which the ego is transmuted, the old self dies, and a new consciousness is born. And there is no symbol more potent of this rebirth than motherhood. Mary, in this sense, represents much more than a biological mother. She is the living symbol of the soul quietly preparing to receive the divine. Her initiation, although silent, may have occurred through deep inner practices, secret teachings, spiritual retreats, and mystical experiences. Perhaps she was guided by hidden priestesses, by wise women who preserved the traditions of the sacred feminine on the fringes of institutionalized power. The very concept of the virgin birth, interpreted by many as a biological miracle, may carry a much more symbolic and initiatory meaning. In many mystical traditions, virginity does not refer to the absence of physical contact, but to the purity of intention, the clarity of the soul, the absence of selfishness. To be a virgin, in this context, is to be free from worldly influences, to be in a state of total receptivity to the divine will. Mary represents this state. She does not impose. She does not question with pride, but surrenders with absolute trust. Let it be done to me according to your word. This phrase, more than a response, is an initiatory mantra. It is the spiritual signature of a soul fully aligned with the flow of creation. The birth of Christ, then, is not just a physical event. It is a profound symbol of the birth of divine consciousness within the human being. And Mary is the matrix of this process. Those who seek spiritual awakening must, symbolically, pass through her. They must develop the qualities she represents: humility, receptivity, surrender, silence, compassion. These are the foundations of true initiation. It is not possible to generate Christ within oneself without first having passed through the matrix of the inner mother. And this mother is not outside of us. She is an archetypal presence that lives in every soul, waiting to be recognized and activated. During Jesus' childhood, Mary would have been his silent guide, not only physically feeding him, but also imparting values, vibrations, deep spiritual meanings. The Gospels say little about this period, but the silence of the narrative may be proof that what happened there could not be contained in ordinary words. It was the realm of invisible formation, the sacred field where the spirit of a master was shaped by a soul equally awakened. Mary did not teach through reason, but through presence. Her wisdom was transmitted by osmosis, by vibration, by coexistence. It was a school without books, but full of conscious love. In Eastern traditions, such as Tibetan Buddhism, there are records of great masters who are trained from childhood by spiritually advanced mothers. Women who, in silence, pass on to their children the wisdom of ancient lineages. Perhaps Mary was one of these mothers. Maybe she received instructions from an early age about her role, about her son's mission, about the spiritual challenges that would come. And even without rationally understanding all the details, she would have accepted this call with an absolute yes. This yes is not passivity. It is spiritual courage. It is inner strength. It is the acceptance of a path of pain, sacrifice, and transcendence in the name of something greater. The presence of Mary alongside Jesus during pivotal moments is not accidental. She is present at the wedding at Cana, where the first miracle occurs. She is at the foot of the cross when all the other disciples flee, and she is with the apostles at Pentecost when the Spirit manifests. These moments reveal her constancy, her loyalty, her deep connection with the cycles of spiritual life. She represents the feminine that never abandons, that sustains even in pain, that remains when everything seems to crumble. This is the power of mature love, which is not diluted by promises, but is rooted in truth. Maria's initiation may have been marked by suffering, by the misunderstanding of the world, by society's judgment, by exile, by escape, by loss. But in every challenge, she did not close off. She expanded. She did not harden. She became more compassionate. This is the alchemy of the true initiate, to transform pain into wisdom, absence into presence, silence into light. Maria is the master of this invisible art, and that's why her legacy isn't written in theological texts, but in the hearts of those who can feel her vibration. Your archetype transcends religion. It appears in ancient cultures as the mother goddess, the great matrix, the lady of wisdom. She is the one who generates, who welcomes, who sustains, and who transforms. In each tradition, this archetype manifests with different names, but the essence is the same. And in Christianity, this essence was given the name of Mary, not as a limited figure, but as a mirror of the divine potential of the sacred feminine. When we understand this, we realize that her testament is not lost. It is vibrating in every soul that awakens to this inner calling. Maria's initiation is also our own. Each of us is called, at some point, to bear Christ within ourselves. To do this, we must return to the symbolic womb of the soul, to the space of silence, contemplation, and inner gestation. Maria invites us to this return, to remember that true transformation does not occur in noise, but in the depth of silence. That light is not born externally, but within our being, and that the highest wisdom is not the one that is shouted, but the one that is lived, silently, with love and surrender. This is the path that Maria walked. This is the path she still invites to tread, not through dogmas, but through presence, not through rules, but through inner revelations, not through a written testament, but through a lived initiation. And perhaps by accepting this invitation, we may understand that the feminine that gives birth to Christ is not only in Maria, it is in all of us, waiting to be recognized, honored, and awakened. There is a wisdom that has never been put into words, a wisdom that is not read with the eyes, but felt with the spirit, an ancestral inheritance that is passed from generation to generation, not through books or treaties, but through vibration, intuition, and presence. This is the wisdom that Mary, the mother of Jesus, may have left to the world, an inheritance that does not fit into the libraries of theology, but pulses in the hearts of those who approach the mystery with humility and reverence. A living knowledge, transmitted without sounds, preserved in gestures, silences, and in the quiet power of the awakened feminine. This is the invisible testament that has crossed the centuries, often ignored, sometimes fought against, but never destroyed. In the first centuries of Christianity, oral tradition was more important than texts. It was common for teachings to be passed on through coexistence, through lived examples, through stories told around the fire. The written word was reserved for a few and did not carry the entirety of the spiritual experience. In this context, women who did not have access to power circles became guardians of invisible knowledge. Knowledge that spoke of the connection with nature, of observing cycles, of healing through hands and listening, of the wisdom of water and earth. Mary, with her silent and transformative presence, would be the pinnacle of this spiritual lineage. Her wisdom did not need to be written because it was lived, and what is fully lived is inscribed in eternity. This hidden heritage manifests itself in various ways: in dreams, in profound intuitions, in subtle visions that touch the soul like a breeze. It has no fixed form because it is alive, and the sacred feminine has always had this ability to flow beyond rigid structures. The presence of Mary, often associated with apparitions, miracles, and spontaneous healings, is a reflection of this living wisdom that operates beyond reason. Why, even without words attributed to her, is her figure one of the most venerated in the world? Why do so many feel her as a mother, as a comfort, as a presence? Because her heritage is not in the books, it is in the vibration she emanates, in the frequency that still echoes for those who know how to listen with the heart. This nonverbal transmission has parallels in the oldest mystical traditions. The Essenes, for example, deeply valued meditation, fasting, silence, and the observation of nature's cycles. They lived in communion with the elements and believed that the divine reveals itself more clearly when the noise of the world ceases. It is likely that Mary had contact with these groups, or that her spirituality was deeply aligned with these practices. This wisdom was not recorded, because paper cannot contain the mystery. It was passed on through coexistence, through attunement, through vibrational contagion. It was a living legacy, and Mary would have been one of the main channels of this transmission. Much of the knowledge of the sacred feminine was also preserved by secret orders, spiritual brotherhoods, and underground traditions that traversed the centuries on the fringes of official religious institutions. Women who were midwives, healers, mystics, prophetesses. They knew about herbs, the phases of the moon, the healing waters, the transformative silence. In Mary, these traditions recognized a hidden master, not the one who spoke to theologians but to the soul, and even without an official text, her presence was being transmitted through these lineages, like a torch passed from hand to hand, keeping the flame of original wisdom alive. There are reports that, in the Middle Ages, some mystical women's orders saw in Mary the origin of a spiritual lineage that passed from woman to woman, from soul to soul. These women were not seeking public recognition. They lived reclusively, in small communities or in silence within the cities, practicing care, listening, and contemplation. They believed that true wisdom did not need to be defended, for it revealed itself to whoever was ready to receive it. This silent faith shaped entire generations. And even without titles or altars, Mary was the center of this invisible heritage. In many of these traditions, the body was considered a temple, and the womb, a sacred altar, not only for generating physical life, but for being the space where the invisible becomes visible, where the spirit meets matter. Mary, as the bearer of Christ, became the ultimate symbol of this sacred fusion. She was not just the mother of a man, she was the mother of a new consciousness, and this consciousness could only be born because it found in her a fertile, purified, silent field, ready to receive. This is the legacy she leaves us, the invitation to purify our inner selves, to silence the ego, to prepare the soul to receive the light that wants to be born. The lunar cycles, the movement of the tides, the wisdom of plants, the rites of passage, all this knowledge was preserved by women who couldn't write, but knew how to feel. Women who didn't master theology, but knew the language of the Spirit. Mary, by being placed as the Queen of the Heavens, as the compassionate mother, as the mediator of graces, is in fact being recognized as the archetype of this ancestral wisdom. Not the wisdom of reasoning, but of intuition. Not of discourse, but of presence. Not of argument, but of the silent love that transforms everything. This hidden heritage also manifests itself in popular expressions of devotion, pilgrimages, prayers, songs, symbols. Each of these practices carries a memory, a reminder of the presence of a woman who, even without speaking, taught, who, even without writing, left deep marks on the soul of those who met her. And perhaps that's why she never needed her own gospel, because her entire life was a living gospel, a teaching that still pulses in the collective unconscious of humanity, waiting for the right moment to fully awaken. And if we stop to observe, we'll realize that this legacy has already begun to awaken. in every woman who listens to her intuition and acts with courage, in every man who honors the feminine within him and breaks away from patterns of domination, in every human being who withdraws to listen to the silence and finds there the voice of the divine. The wisdom of Mary was not lost. It was simply kept safe, shielded from the noise of the world, waiting for humanity to mature enough to listen to it. And now that time has come. Now we are ready to remember. Thus, Maria's testament was not written on scrolls, but on souls. It was not recorded with ink, but with love. It was not proclaimed from pulpits, but whispered in silence. And this testament continues to live, vibrating in every gesture of compassion, in every act of care, in every choice to listen rather than judge. It lives within us and is waiting to be awakened. All it takes is for us to want to remember. What could not be written in the scrolls, what was silenced in the councils and erased from the pulpits, echoed in other ways. The secret testament of Mary, mother of Jesus, may have been passed on not by books or documents, but by other women who, centuries later, became living expressions of this same forgotten wisdom. Voices that spoke amidst the imposed silence, souls that dared to bloom in a world that still did not know how to hear the awakened feminine. They not only carried Mary's legacy, they made it reborn in different times and cultures. Women like Mary Magdalene, Clare of Assisi, and Hildegard of Bingen became portals through which this silent light could manifest, each in her own way, each keeping alive a flame that never went out. Mary Magdalene is perhaps the most controversial and the most luminous of these figures. Pointed out for centuries as a sinner, then as a beloved disciple, today she is recognized by many traditions as the bearer of the true gnosis, the direct knowledge of Christ. In Gnostic texts, such as the Gospel of Mary, she is not merely a follower, she is a master. She understands the deepest teachings, interprets spiritual visions, calms the confused apostles. It's possible that she received this wisdom directly from Jesus, but it's also plausible to imagine that part of her initiation came from Mary, the mother. After all, in the silence of the home of Nazareth, during the hidden years of the Master's spiritual formation, Magdalene may have had access to the living source of Marian wisdom, and by carrying it forward, she becomes its most fervent and daring reflection. Maddalena represents the fiery aspect of feminine wisdom. She not only contemplates, she acts, proclaims, confronts. Her legacy is that of the fire that transforms. In contrast, Clara of Assisi, already in the 13th century, embodies the contemplative aspect, the withdrawal, the absolute renunciation. Clara abandoned all privileges, renounced wealth and visibility, to live in silence and devotion. Her life was a constant prayer. In the cloister, fasting, in meditation, she touched dimensions of consciousness that few dared to imagine. Clara was seen by many as a reincarnation of the Virgin Mary, or at least as a mirror of her presence. The way she welcomed the sisters, how she cared for the poor, how she illuminated the environment with her simple presence, all of this was an expression of the wisdom that Mary had silently transmitted. And so, there is Hildegard of Bingen, mystic, composer, prophetess, doctor, theologian, a 12th century woman who broke all bonds and rose as a voice of the Spirit at a time when women could not even speak in public. Hildegard claimed to have had visions since childhood, visions of light, of celestial beings, of profound messages about the body, the soul, nature, and the cosmos. She wrote about natural medicine, about the interconnection between the microcosm and the macrocosm, about the importance of listening to the earth. Her work is one of the greatest testimonies to the recovery of the sacred feminine in the Middle Ages. In her writings, there are clear echoes of the Marian heritage, the care, the compassion, the integration of opposites, the listening to invisible voices. Hildegard was, without a doubt, a spiritual daughter of Mary. These three women, Maddalena, Clara, and Hildegarda, represent different facets of the same legacy. Maddalena is the courageous heart that carries revelation to the world. Clara is the womb of silence that protects and nurtures. Hildegarda is the enlightened mind that translates the invisible into words, music, and therapies. Together they form a feminine trinity that echoes Mary's unwritten testament. They did not proclaim it directly, but they lived it in their lives. becoming an expression of this wisdom that is transmitted through being, not through speech. And there are so many other voices. Anonymous mystics, midwives who prayed in secret, women who healed with their hands, who read the signs of nature, who taught their daughters the power of intuition. The legacy of Maria is not restricted to great names. It lives in all these hidden presences who kept the flame of wisdom lit when everything around was darkness. The Testament was protected, not in cathedrals, but in homes, not in libraries, but in hearts. And its language is not Latin, Hebrew, or Greek. It's silence, compassion, and inner listening. This invisible thread that binds these women to Mary is not just symbolic, it's energetic. It's a vibrational transmission that transcends time. Each time a woman quiets herself to listen to her soul, she connects to this field. Each time a human being, man or woman, acts with tenderness amidst pain, this legacy manifests. Mary's testament was not lost. It simply took on other forms, waiting for the right time to emerge with greater clarity. And now, in this century where the feminine begins to be revalued, it begins to bloom with more strength and presence. This lineage is not hierarchical. There is no struggle for power, positions, or authority. It is a circular lineage, spiraling, where each awakening soul becomes part of the whole. Magdalene does not replace Mary, Clara does not compete with Magdalene, Hildegard does not nullify either of the two. They all add up. Each one is a distinct tone of the same cosmic melody. And each one of us, upon hearing this music, can remember that we also carry this inheritance, that we too can become an echo of this silent testament. In current times, this wisdom begins to re-emerge in new faces. Women who write, who guide, who welcome, who awaken. Men who connect with their sensitivity, with listening, with care. Children who are already born with this light in their eyes. The testament remains alive. It continues to be written, not with ink, but with actions, with choices, with intentions. And in each generation, new Marias arise, new Magdalenes, Claras, and Hildegards rise, even without knowing that they are following an ancestral thread. Perhaps the question is no longer whether this testament exists, but how we can live it. How we too can become a continuation of this wisdom. How we can listen to the voice that Maria never wrote, but whispers in every gesture of genuine love. How we can welcome this legacy and pass it on, not as doctrine, but as a transformative presence. Because at the end of the day, this is the deepest mission: to make visible what was hidden, to make audible what was silenced, to make present what has always been there. There are words that do not need to be spoken to exist. There are teachings that do not require scrolls or pens, because they are already inscribed in a deeper place, the human heart. The secret testament of Jesus' mother may never have been recorded because it was not meant to be read with the eyes, but to be felt with the soul. It is an inner call, a quiet awakening, a subtle reminder of what has always been within us, but that time and the world have made sure to bury. This testament, more than a historical legacy, is a vibration that pulses in the consciousness of those who open themselves to silence. It is the living word that Mary embodied, not to be proclaimed, but to be lived, breathed, welcomed into the depths of existence. It may be possible that all the wisdom Maria carried was transmitted in this way, not through speeches, but by the quality of her presence. In many spiritual traditions, the true master is not the one who speaks a lot, but the one who radiates such a high frequency that, just by being near, the other begins to transform. This presence is, in itself, a teaching. Maria carried with her this rare quality. Her serenity, her humility, her silent firmness were like mirrors where each one could recognize themselves, where the ego dissolved and the spirit revealed itself. Perhaps Christ was awakened in Jesus not only for being the Word made flesh, but because he was conceived and nurtured by the living consciousness of this woman. Upon understanding this inner testament, we realize that it is not made of rules or commandments, but of subtle guidances imprinted on the soul. It manifests when we choose to remain silent instead of reacting, to welcome instead of judging, to trust instead of controlling. It appears in the spontaneous gesture of compassion, in the deep listening, in the healing touch, It is not on the stone altars, but on the altar of the heart. And like all true knowledge, it cannot be imposed. It needs to be discovered, rediscovered, rescued from the depths of being. Each person who turns inward with sincerity is, unknowingly, opening the living pages of this hidden testament. The language that this legacy uses is symbolic. It speaks through archetypes, dreams, synchronicities, deep emotions. Therefore, it does not fit into rational theology, nor into closed doctrines. It escapes from words, but inscribes itself in gestures. Maria may have understood that the future of humanity would not depend on new dogmas, but on the rediscovery of what is eternal and unchangeable, the light that each being carries. Thus, instead of leaving a manuscript, she became a mirror for each soul to see itself as it is, pure, divine, whole, worthy of receiving Christ within. This inner testament is also a map, a path for those who wish to reconnect with their essence. But this map does not point outward, it points inward. It guides us through the inner desert, over the mountains of ego, through the valleys of doubt, to the sacred center of the soul where the Mother dwells. Finding this center is to rediscover Mary within us, not as a religious figure, but as a frequency of silent love, as an archetype of supreme care, as a principle that generates, protects, sustains, and gives. When we recognize this, we discover that we do not need to seek outside what is already complete within. This discovery changes everything, because it frees us from the dependence on intermediaries, external saviors, structures that have always told us what to think and how to live. Mary's testament, being internal, is liberating. It gives us back the power we forgot. It reminds us that we are a temple, that we are a womb, that we are a verb in gestation. No matter who we are, what our story is, what our pain is, the Mother welcomes us and tells us without words that it is still possible to be born again, that Christ can be born in us if we are willing to carry him with faith, silence, and love. The heart is the true parchment of this legacy. In it are written the memories of the soul, the recollections of the spirit, the messages that came before time. When we connect with this sacred space, something awakens, a nameless longing, a presence that envelops us, a certainty that needs no proof. It's Maria whispering in the depths of the soul, reminding us of who we are. And this whisper, when heard, transforms. It lifts the weight, dissolves the fear, ignites the light. There is no sin that can withstand the touch of this presence. There is no pain that cannot be embraced by this love. This process of inner listening is a practice, a path that requires consistency, patience, surrender. Meditation, silence, contemplation are keys. But more than techniques, it's the pure intention that opens the doors. It's not about doing right or wrong, but about being whole, about seeking sincerely. The Testament of Mary is offered to all, but only understood by those who read it with the heart. It reveals itself slowly, like the sun that rises gradually. Each gesture, each insight, each lived compassion is a line of this living gospel. In the experience of this legacy, a new motherhood is born, not just biological, but spiritual. Each human being who awakens becomes a channel, a symbolic womb that can generate healing, peace, awareness. The world urgently needs these new births, souls willing to be living Mariahs, to carry within them the vibration of the Mother, to offer comfort where there is pain, silence where there is outcry, listening where there is confusion. This is the testament in action, transforming, revealing itself in everyday life. The deepest understanding of this testament is also the simplest. We are loved, unconditionally, eternally. This love, which Mary embodied, is the foundation of life. No matter what we have done, how many times we have fallen, there is always a new chance. There is always a new womb ready to receive us. There is always a new birth possible. When we feel this, when we allow this truth to touch us, something changes forever. And perhaps this is the ultimate purpose of this legacy, to awaken in each being the remembrance that they are worthy of love, capable of light, bearer of the divine. Finally, this testament does not end with Maria. It continues. It moves from soul to soul, from gesture to gesture. It lives in every act of generosity, in every sincere hug, in every welcomed tear. We are all invisible authors of this silent gospel, and each one, by living with truth and love, writes a new line in this sacred book that is not found on any shelf, but pulses at the core of being. The testament is alive, and it is waiting to be remembered. Within you, within us. For millennia, the voice of the sacred feminine has been buried under layers of fear, control, and domination. In the name of order, dogma, and hierarchy, attempts were made to silence what was spontaneous, profound, and intuitive. The words that Maria never wrote but which silently echoed through generations seem to have been lost forever in the shadows of oblivion. However, what is true does not disappear. It only hides until the time is ripe. And now, in the 21st century, that time has arrived. We are witnessing a global movement of recovery. The feminine, which for so long has been marginalized, is re-emerging with a strength that can no longer be denied, a serene yet unshakable strength, a force that does not want to dominate, but to balance, that does not wish to replace the masculine, but dance in harmony with it. This awakening is not merely symbolic. It manifests itself in a tangible way in various areas of life. We see the exponential growth of women in leadership positions, not as copies of patriarchal models, but bringing new ways of thinking, feeling, and acting. The female presence is asserting itself through its vibrational quality, through listening, empathy, the ability to gather, mediate, and care. In parallel, we also see men awakening to aspects of themselves that were previously repressed: sensitivity, vulnerability, intuition. It's as if a collective memory is being activated, awakening the forgotten codes that Maria and so many others silently preserved. In the field of spirituality, this movement is even more visible. Groups, circles, communities, and practices dedicated to the sacred feminine are multiplying. Women gather to celebrate lunar cycles, recall ancestral wisdom, reconnect with their bodies and the earth. Many of these circles reference Mary, but not the institutionalized Mary, frozen in images and altars, but the living, archetypal, free Mary, the one who represents the womb of creation, the mother of compassion, the force that supports transformation. This Mary is being rediscovered not only as a historical figure, but as a spiritual frequency, as an inner path. This rediscovery is also reflected in the renewed interest in once rejected female figures, such as Mary Magdalene. For centuries considered a sinner, today she is revered as a bearer of Christic wisdom, initiated into the mysteries, a messenger of a truth the world did not want to hear. Her symbolic rise accompanies the resurgence of the feminine as a whole. Together, Magdalene and Mary represent two aspects of the same energy: the fire of revelation and the water of gestation. Both were silenced, both were hidden, but neither of them were forgotten. And now, their voices return, not through old words, but through thousands of women and men who feel, intuit, and remember. In the therapeutic and holistic field, the presence of the feminine is also powerfully felt. Energy therapies, self-care practices, reconnection with nature, meditations guided by feminine archetypes, all of this is part of a movement back to the essence. And in many of these practices, Mary is invoked not as a distant figure, but as a close, accessible, loving presence. The mother who consoles, who welcomes, who holds your hand in times of pain. More and more people report dreams, visions, and sensations linked to Marian energy, as if she were reappearing not in the heavens, but within each heart that opens. This resurgence is not a fleeting trend. It is a spiritual realignment of humanity. The earth, with its feminine energy, also cries out for this balance. And the planet responds. Women's bodies respond. Men's hearts respond. The new consciousness that is forming is one of integration, where reason and intuition walk hand in hand, where strength and tenderness do not oppose each other, where the spirit no longer needs to hide behind masks of rigidity. In this new world that is emerging, Mary's secret testament finds fertile ground to flourish because there is finally listening. Finally, there is space. Finally, there is maturity. The esoteric tradition has always taught that the cycles of humanity follow great waves of expansion and contraction, and that the return of the sacred feminine marks the beginning of a new era, the era of the soul. This new stage does not deny what came before, but transcends it. It takes the learnings from the past to a new level of consciousness. In this sense, the resurgence of Mary as a universal symbol is inevitable. She is the point of convergence between the human and the divine. She represents unconditional love, compassionate wisdom, the alchemy of presence. And this is precisely what the world needs most now: a spirituality that welcomes, that transforms without aggression, that heals without hurting. In the arts, in music, in literature, we see this renaissance expressing itself. Songs that invoke the name of Maria as healing mantras, novels that explore her human and spiritual dimension, paintings and dances that bring her image as a representation of the new consciousness. The secret testament is being revealed not in doctrinal speeches, but in creative gestures, in inspired works, in movements that touch the soul. It's as if, slowly, what was hidden begins to show itself, not as dogma, but as poetry, not as a system, but as inspiration. And so she returns, not with a bang, but with lightness, not to dominate, but to remind. In families, we see mothers reconnecting with their daughters in a more conscious way, fathers allowing their emotions to surface, children growing up in environments where they can be sensitive without being shamed. All of this is part of this rebirth, and the more this movement grows, the stronger Maria's legacy becomes, because she has always been that, the womb of love, the safe space where Christ could be born. And Christ now is ready to be born again, not in a manger, but in the heart of an awakened humanity. The most impressive thing is that this resurgence of the feminine does not require leaders nor large structures. It spreads through invisible fields, like a seed sprouting in different soils at the same time. It is guided by the soul, and this makes it unstoppable. Where there is listening, it flourishes. Where there is openness, it manifests. Where there is silence, it sings. Mary's secret testament is no longer hidden. It is revealing itself with every gesture of compassion, with every act of quiet courage, with every soul that chooses love over fear. The presence of the mother is returning to the world, not as a supernatural entity, but as an archetypal memory, as a loving force, as a consciousness that transforms. She doesn't demand temples, she only needs open hearts. She doesn't require complex rituals, just authenticity. And her testament, contrary to what was imagined, is not lost. It is more alive than ever, pulsating in every corner where the feminine is honored, in every space where the human being is seen as sacred. What was secret now begins to be understood. What was invisible now begins to be felt. What was silence now begins to be a song. If there were a final message, a letter that was never opened, a testament kept, written not on paper, but in the light of the stars, in the echo of silence, in the language that only the Spirit understands, and if this message, lost in time, was intended not just for those who lived with it, but to us, now, at this exact moment in history, what would Mary, Mother of Jesus, say to the world today if she could speak directly to the heart of humanity? Would it be a revelation, a warning, a promise, or perhaps just a gesture, like those that always carried more truth than 1,000 words? If we listened with the soul instead of the ears, perhaps we already knew the answer. Maybe she is speaking now, and we simply forgot to listen. Perhaps she wouldn't start with dogmas or doctrines. Maybe she wouldn't repeat any known prayer. Perhaps she would just say, "Go back inside." Because the world has lost itself in noise, it's lost in excess, in haste, in the struggle for meanings. And Mary, with her serene wisdom, would remind us that the kingdom her son announced was never external. It was always inside. It was always silence. It was always the available heart. She would say that before seeking miracles, we should seek presence. That before hoping for salvation, we should choose the path of surrender. And that before speaking of faith, we need to learn to listen, not with the mind, but with the essence. She might tell us that the true birth of Christ was not only the one in Bethlehem, but the one that happens every time love is placed above fear. That every time someone chooses to forgive, understand, and welcome, even in pain, a new birth occurs. That Christ is a consciousness, and that this consciousness is ready to inhabit every human being who wishes to be a spiritual womb. She would tell us that the world does not need more heroes, but more whole souls. That salvation will not come through dogmas or institutions, but through each brave choice to love even when the world says otherwise. If Mary could speak today, perhaps she would look at us with the same eyes she used to look at her son on the cross, not with despair, but with unshakable love. She would see us in our pain, in our confusion, in our loneliness, and yet she would love us unconditionally because she would know that suffering is part of the spiritual gestation process, that humanity is in labor, and that every contraction, no matter how intense, is bringing us closer to a new consciousness. A consciousness where the masculine and the feminine, the heaven and the earth, the spirit and the matter, finally meet again. She would say with gentle firmness, "You have forgotten who you are, but there is still time to remember that each one of us is a child of light, that we carry within us the spark of the divine, that we are not unworthy, nor sinners, nor lost, just asleep, and that her mission, from the beginning, was to protect this flame until we could rekindle it ourselves." Mary did not come to replace us, nor to save us, but to remind us, to recall a time before fear, before guilt, before separation. A time when we were one with the source, and that we can still return to this place, not physically, but in consciousness, in vibration, in choice. She might reveal to us that the suffering we see in the world is not punishment, but a reflection of our own disconnection, that wars, hunger, violence stem from wounded hearts, from souls that have forgotten the path of love, and that as long as we seek only external solutions, we will ignore the root of the problem. That healing begins within, that the world is a reflection of what we carry, and that transforming the planet is, above all, an intimate, individual, silent process. She would call us to responsibility, but not the kind that weighs, rather the kind that liberates, the responsibility of being what we came to be, channels of the divine in the world. Perhaps she would ask us to slow down, to contemplate more, to touch the earth with bare feet, to look into others' eyes, to silence the cell phone and listen to the wind, to return to simple rituals, to give thanks, to care for the water, the fire, the seed, the child, because within these small acts, the sacred resides. Mary, who carried the word within her, knows that the Spirit manifests in the smallest things, and that the extraordinary doesn't need to be spectacular, just true. She would call us back to the essence, not to run from the world, but to transform it from within. If I were to speak directly to women, I might say, remember your power. Being a woman is not about carrying guilt, nor being a shadow, nor being a servant. It's about being a portal. Each woman carries within her the potential to generate not just children, but light, consciousness, compassion. The pain that many carry, the ancestral wounds, the imposed silences, all of this can transform into living wisdom. They don't need to conform to external standards, but only listen to their soul. And the world desperately needs what only they can offer: the healing touch, the welcoming word, the courage to feel. And to men she might say, you were not made for war, that behind the armor there is a heart that weeps, that being strong is not about repressing, but loving bravely, that the awakened masculine is one who protects, not oppresses, who leads with humility, not imposition, who serves, not dominates, who listens, not silences. She would call them back to the heart, to the inner child, to peace. And she would show that the true warrior is not the one who conquers others, but the one who conquers himself, that Christ needs awakened men as much as healed women, that only together can the new world be born. And finally, it might leave us with a single sentence, a whisper that echoes like thunder in the soul: Love is enough. Not the romantic love, limited, conditional, but the love that demands nothing, that simply is, that sustains the universe, that moves the planets, that heals without medicine, that transforms without violence, that saves without religion. This love that she lived in silence, that she carried in her womb, that she gave to the world and saw being crucified, but that even so did not die, because love does not die. It is reborn, in every gesture, in every awakened soul, in every true choice. This is the testament, not the one that was hidden in the Vatican archives, not the one sealed in caves or lost codices, but the one that vibrates now, at this very moment, within you. If you close your eyes, if you listen carefully, you might hear it, not as an external voice, but as a memory, as a subtle recognition of something you've always known, but forgot. And then, in that moment, the testament is fulfilled, because it can only be read with an open heart, and it can only be lived by those who are willing to love, despite everything. The mother did not leave. She never left. She is here, in every act of tenderness, in every tear comforted, in every silent awakening. The will is not closed. It is being written now by all who choose to live in truth, by all who, even in the midst of chaos, say, yes, yes to love, yes to silence, yes to the sacred, yes to the Christ who wants to be born again, this time not in a distant cave, but at the center of an awakened heart, in the living temple of humanity that at last begins to remember who it is. Now that you have encountered this sacred wisdom, which has been hidden for millennia, tell me, what awakened in you upon hearing this silent testament of Mary? Do you feel within you this silent presence, this universal mother who transforms with love and listens? Leave your comment below with the phrase, "I am a living part of the Mother's Testament," and share with us which part of this message touched your soul the most deeply. Let's manifest this awakening together, because every comment here activates a wave of light that resonates beyond time. You are not alone, Mind Unfettered. We are together in this journey of remembrance and reconnection. And if you felt that something opened up inside of you today, so the next step is inevitable. The Mother's will is just the beginning. Jesus also left a secret map, an inner guide to enlightenment. Click now on the video that's popping up here on your screen. The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment, and continue this journey with an awakened heart and an open soul. See you there, Mind Unfettered.